Okay, I'm recording this video mostly for Connor Hoekstra at Code Report. I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel, though. It's easier to explain what's going on in video, I think, than having to type this all out. So, Connor, I've been chasing down this issue about strings, string literals in Jello, Jelly not working properly. I put some responses out there that you probably already saw, and then I chased it down, and I was still digging into it. But I know now why it's not working. So this is interpreter py of Jelly, which is subdirectory under the Jellyfish project, which of your repo that I've cloned, and I cloned Jello as well. So I'm just running this straight on Jelly itself, not through Jello. And if we just enter the command, this is the one that Connor's talking about specifically, which is in Jello. This basically is a code expression followed by two arguments, so it's dyadic, and the first argument is, according to the Jelly notation, is a character, and the second is a string, and it's got these kind of funny UTF-8 sorts of double quotes. They're not the typical sort of quotes you see in a code page. But anyway, run this, and I added some tracing in here to figure out what was going on. And there's a couple of internal functions that get called that basically deal with the arguments and pull it apart. And in particular, this one right here, this Jellyfy. We'll look at Jellyfy. We can see that it's checking the type, the actual Python type. This gets called, there's a sequence of function calls. It's not that important, but basically it boils down to this. It says, look, if it's a string, I'm going to pull it apart into a list, and that's what we see happening here. The first one is a string. It's converted to a list in which it actually breaks the supposedly the literal syntax according to the tutorial information about how to do Jelly. And what's strange is that, well, not strange, but the problem is that this syntax works fine if the arguments are embedded in the expression itself. So if we actually put it in the expression, we make an expression with the arguments on both sides. In this case, dyadic. So it's got. I'm gonna put the whole thing in a set of shell/Python quotes. Then it parses properly. So we can see the actual code is the full expression with the arguments embedded in it, and it seems to be fine. And what happens is when it parses the code. Let's actually find parse code. I know I'm jumping around, but hopefully you can follow what I'm talking about. So the actual code calls parse literal down here, and we can see it actually gets coded in here. And parse literal is where it is looking for these special characters. So if you look at the special characters to indicate a string, particularly this is the open string back double quote. So if we look at that in the source, you can see it shows up in here on a code page variable. The uneval, which basically takes the internal expression and then re-expresses that in code. Obviously, it's saying this is a string. It's going to show it to you as a string. But here's where it's really used to kind of parse, and it parses the literal. And it only parses this literal, this parse code. It's the only guy that calls parse literal. So if we look at parse literal here, it's only getting called inside parse code. And you can see I put trace statements on both. And so literally, the literal is only parsed or evaluated as part of the code itself. You can see the only argument to parse code is code, not the arguments that are passed as input arguments. So when we put it in this format, which is a valid format according to the Jelly documentation and according to how it works, we are putting the code expression first, followed by two input arguments separately. And if we do that, you'll see that parse code gets called on just the expression itself, in this case E, which is the symbol or the glyph for finding an element inside of an array. And so parse literal never gets called. So it does this funky thing here where whenever it's a string, it splits the string up into a list. But that doesn't seem to really even matter. I actually did a couple of tests here, like seeing if I could find C without using quotes inside an array of characters. And it still recognizes that the individual first argument C is a Python string, so it stuffs it into a list. And you can see it treats the second one as a string. I have to put the backslash here because otherwise shell is going to complain, Z shell is going to complain about the syntax here, right? Because it's going to try to interpret that backslash on the command line. If I put this in quotes, that's a back quote. I can use single quotes, I can use double quotes. You can see, you know, it still kind of basically says, oh, well, it's a string. I'm going to break it up. And in this case, it's actually treating the bracket as part of the string. Now, to compare that to when we actually put numbers in instead of characters. So I have in here, this parses and executes properly. So I'm passing two input arguments. The left argument is the scalar 3. The right argument is the array of integers with 3 in it. And you can see it says, oh, this is a number. These are all individual numbers. It treats these arguments as the way they are. It parses the expression with these arguments and says, yes, I found 3. In fact, I can test that by just, let's say, 7 in there. And it says no. So what ends up happening is anytime it's dealing with characters and strings, it just seems to fall apart. And I think that's mainly because what's happening here is that even if it pulls this into a list, there's nothing that's going to parse this list of individual characters and reconcatenate them, because you can see in here, it's only looking for these back quotes and these other quotes as part of the code expression itself. It never gets called. Like, let's see this. I'll go back up to the top. Yeah. And in fact, it shows up down here. You can see the regular expression that's built up on this. So there's an irregular expression, strings. We search on that, we see a string literal is made up these various ways. And this matches the documentation, right? These are the various forms of creating a string literal, which it seems to work fine. It parses string literal just fine, right? In fact, if we look for string literal, let's look at that. We see that goes into this variable regex literal. And where is regex literal used? Only in parse code. It's the only place it's used. So there's no code in here that is evaluating a string input argument and then treating it as, well, this is a jelly string literal of some kind, right? So it just kind of falls apart and ends up not working. And as you can see, when we embed it in the expression, when we embed instead of having input arguments on the command line, we just combine it as part of the expression, then it works fine. And you can see there's where it's parsing. It's going, oh, interesting how it's treating this as a number. I didn't notice that before. Probably, It does match. Does it treat it? Why does it treat it as a number? Well, this Jellyfish is a very I don't know where that's getting called. That's, obviously this tracing, I just threw this together and, we would have to step through all that. But I think I've identified the essential problem here is that it doesn't go through parsing the input arguments according to the Jelly syntax. It only considers the input arguments to be strings from the standpoint of Python and or shell. And in fact, if you look at the argument eval, there's something called Python eval. Let's see, Python eval. You can see where it gets called. This is where it calls Jellyfish. And Python eval is called by try eval, and try eval is the thing that actually gets called on the arguments. But not in here. There's a separate file where it does that. Anyway, that's as far as I've gotten. Yeah, obviously we could probably fix this and make it so that it could take these string arguments properly. Let me know if you're interested in following up on that, or if we've just gone down a dead end that we don't want to follow any further. That's it. Thanks for watching, and in all of your programming, I wish you the best of luck.